This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We are getting so close to that time. NBA season is right on the precipice. You know that it's starting to kind of percolate a little bit because the NBA Hall of Fame finalists have been announced, have been crowned, have been ceremoniously etched into the archives of greatness. And so our episode is definitely going to be covering this awesome class of Hall of Fame recipients. But as always, man, the NBA storylines do not sleep. So to go through all of that stuff and give you your fill, let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, looking fly as per usual, rocking the tan baseline NBA cap, which I believe in most sports like softball and baseball would be a good look. We need to sponsor a team. The team needs to be sponsored rocking the fly color combination that you're presenting to us, my man.
You know what it is, brother. We got to keep it representing here on the Baseline NBA podcast. The latest new trucker Baseline NBA hat.
The trucker style, exactly. Trucker style. We need a trucker league.
I'm in that phase right now. I'm buying a bunch of trucker hats, 19 Media branded in the whole nine. But excited to be here, brother. As you alluded to, the NBA season is literally a couple of weeks away when it comes to media day. But a great show here to talk about some Hall of Fame, kind of in a reminisce style. I can't wait to kind of get into that. But we got some other stuff to get to as well, too, brother. So we got to get it popping.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Oh, by the way, you got to let people know where they can go to cop the trucker hat, my friend.
Yes, sir. Head up to the 19 Media Group shop on Spread Shop. So go ahead and just look for us there. All the 19 Media Group stuff will be in there. I'll actually put the link in the description of the show as well, too, if you're so inclined. And maybe even link this hat specifically on our shop. It's something you can go directly to that as well, too. But 19 Media Group on Spread Shop.
Absolutely. All right, so we got a jam-packed episode. We got a lot of stuff to get into. Clearly, there's been stuff happening in the NBA, investigations, signings, but of course, the main part of our show is really to kind of highlight and do our reminisce over you segment that we normally do, where we're doing a reminisce of a particular player. But I think, as my man Shaw had so well put, it's only right that we kind of do like a reminisce over you over the class, the 2025 Hall of Fame class, and quite an impressive class of inductees, have been added to the list. And so we're going to definitely get into that. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at The Warren Shaw. You can get at me at Game Face Leader, show's Twitter handle, NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Go to www.thebaselinenba.com. That's our homepage. You can check out not just this episode, but also the archive of episodes that we've been rocking for you for ever so long. For all of our peoples that are catching this on the YouTube channel, we'd like to say hello to you and yours. And if you see the blue and white logo down on the right-hand side of your screen, just know that is the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, you're running these content streets. Be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check us, but also the family of great content creators that are a part of 19 Media Group. So be sure to check it out, man. We got everything for your listening pleasure. You name it, we got it. So definitely go and check out our peoples, man. They put on great content for your listening pleasure. So Shaw, let's get right into the butter goods. If people have been following whatever social media outlet that you get your feed on stuff going on in the NBA, there is a big investigation that is taking place. And this is in relation to Kawhi Leonard and the LA Clippers, who are at the center of significant controversy. The NBA has launched a high-profile investigation into allegations that the Clippers attempted to circumvent the salary cap by facilitating a $28 million no-show endorsement deal for Kawhi Leonard through a now bankrupt sustainability company. The probe, which includes a law firm hired by the NBA, could lead to serious consequences for the team if violations are confirmed. This also adds to Leonard's reputation of his propensity to miss games. Basically, he's nearly missed half of his regular season contests during his career, and his last season, just recently played 37 games before returning to full playoff series. So, Shaw, we'll get into a little bit about the stuff regarding the the perception of Kawhi Leonard, I couldn't help but give this Sopranos feel when we talk about, no show endorsement deals and no show jobs, like as if that really still happens in today. And lo and behold, we are right in the midst of a Soprano resurgence.
Well, that's really apropos. It's almost like you've been in my house. I literally just started watching Sopranos. That's a whole other conversation for another time. I never watched the show. So I'm literally in season 3 right now. So I'm really getting familiar with kind of the Sopranoism, so to speak. But to me, the ironic thing about this entirety situation is that it's a no-show deal for a guy who doesn't play all that often. And so just Kawhi getting away with doing literally nothing in this case, but always kind of the bare minimum for somebody who is so great is a really interesting situation. But the board of governors is going to meet probably by the time this show kind of comes out, and we'll see what the league is going to ultimately do with this. But there's a lot of smoke here. We got to see if there's fire, but it doesn't smell right. It looks and feels a little funky. And I know a lot of teams, especially the rest of the league, who doesn't have the same pockets that Ballmer does, saying if the Clippers have found a way to circumvent the salary cap by doing stuff like this for Kawhi Leonard, some serious repercussions are going to have to be in store.
I know this sounds really cheesy, man, but you said it just doesn't smell right. When there's smoke, there's fire, and we're talking about a bankrupt sustainability company that's in the heart of the situation. It's interesting. I actually, had some interest, years before, about aspirations. They were all over the place, emphasis on, being not just a sustainable finance company, but, really, really, really serious about the earth, right? And serious about its efforts to help the earth and sustainability and things of that nature. And to find out that literally this is a bankrupt, company, like literally, and to find out that somehow they are wedged into this machine that we call the NBA. I mean, it just speaks volumes, man, that like nowadays it just feels like who people are and what they represent, you really have to do your research. You have to do your due diligence and see if whether or not they are what they practice. They are what they're practicing, right? They're practicing what they preach. Obviously, every business is out there about making money, and you put your hands in so many different pots. But if you don't pay attention to your pot, you might wind up either with burnt food, or you might wind up with a very dissatisfying taste in whatever your final meal might be. And that literally could be the situation with the Los Angeles Clippers. And I'm not saying this, to be tongue in cheek. I'm actually being for real, because the Los Angeles Clippers have for the longest time tried to get out of the controversy of being not a well-owned team, not being a team that is taken seriously, always is the little brother to the Los Angeles Lakers. And here you have an owner who we genuinely have seen in so many different ways, in so many different occasions. He really is passionate about seeing the Los Angeles Clippers succeed. He's been on different outlets saying that he had no knowledge of this, that, any of this was happening, that this was going on. I find that very hard to believe. I'm not saying I don't believe Steve Ballmer, but I am saying that if you're getting out there and you're actually saying this stuff, to me, it's just still not a good look, because as a mogul, as somebody who has been as successful as he has been in businesses, I find it hard to believe that your team didn't do its due diligence of knowing what kind of people are surrounding Kawhi Leonard, what kind of people are involved in things involving Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi Leonard is your cornerstone player. This isn't the dude that you're bringing up from the G League, or the guy that, you can't even pronounce his name on a two-way deal. This literally is a guy that is what started the reason why you put the Los Angeles Clippers away from the Staples Center to build all the things that you're building, and to be in the midst of that. It's just unheard of to think that nobody on your team was aware of what was going on or what was taking place here. And then in a way, you might actually be throwing Kawhi Leonard into the bus, because if Kawhi Leonard hasn't said anything to this, but he's going to have to, if he doesn't speak up to the fact that he had any knowledge that this was taking place, right? Ultimately, you're saying that whatever is going on here, Kawhi Leonard may have known. because there's only two people that really know about this, and both names are under investigation. So somebody's got to know something.
Well, shout out to Pablo Torre as well too. We want to make sure that we give.
The big shout out.
Story.
Love him, man. I miss him so much on so many of the different quote unquote ESPN outlets. But I really appreciated his intellectual perspective on things that needed to be said about the things that are going on in sports.
Yeah. And so I think with this now, Kawhi has always been a interesting kind of mysterious type of superstar. He's got his bread like that. There's no two ways about it. Now it's a matter of, was his bread done? The bread he got, was it done in a legal way in accordance to NBA CBA guidelines? And those are things we'll need to find out. But the league cannot just kind of do a half-ass investigation here. They really need to dig down into this and figure out as much as they possibly can. I know Cuban has kind of come to Ballmer's aid, and people with money get defrauded all the time, which seems kind of ridiculous. But I mean, it does happen. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to cast judgment. All we're doing is reporting what we know, or kind of like giving our takes on what was reported out there. And we'll need to see what ends up happening with Kawhi, Steve Ballmer, and the LA Clippers.
Well, so two other points, Sean, before we move on. The first thing is that this type of, first of all, $28 million, when we're talking about a Kawhi Leonard and we're talking about a Steve Ballmer, is like a drop in the hat, okay? In the grand scheme of what Kawhi Leonard has basically made off of the Los Angeles Clippers. So to me, I think where the problem lies is, if you're the NBA, what kind of people do you have sleeping in my bed? You know what I'm saying? Like, you truly have to start questioning. Like, this was one of the problems that I think we've even spoken to this about brand activation, right? And brand having, having a foot in the door, so to speak, through other channels other than what the NBA does. And we feel those frustrations because at times the NBA, I think, regulates too much, probably misplaced regulation, so to speak. They regulate on the people who genuinely and honestly want to help elevate the game, because by elevating the game, it elevates those outlets that are tapped into it, right? But when you have situations like this going on, now all of a sudden the NBA starts putting its clamps down, and that could lend itself to repercussions that might hurt those smaller entities that are trying to make their way. They're trying to figure out a way to get in on this money machine that is the NBA. And it's unfortunate because when you have star players and owners in the middle of this, it gives credence and justification for Silver and his team to do certain things. And the guinea pigs, the test case, are always going to be the little men. It won't be those guys, because to your point, they've already gotten paid. You know what I'm saying? At the very least, whatever comes down, whatever ramifications take place, have to be severe enough that it's sending a message to all of the teams that this can't be allowed. But at some point, you have to wonder if whether or not this is still going to be for the good of the NBA.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is that I think there was similar precedent. It was Joe Smith way back in the day. I was listening to another podcast previously, and I think they were referencing that, where Joe Smith and the Timberwolves got into some shenanigans, if you will, and it costed the Timberwolves, I think it was like 4 or 5 first-round picks. The Clippers don't have a whole lot of draft equity because of the Paul George deals. Like, that could be really disastrous, despite the deep pockets that Ballmer has. If you don't have picks, in essence, to be able to draft and curate talent, that puts your team in a really, really precarious situation, especially with the Kawhi aging the way that he is. Again, we just need to wait to see what ends up finding out. But hopefully things are on the up and up. I'm not rooting against them here, but it doesn't look amazing right now for the Clippers.
Yeah, it doesn't look amazing. And it doesn't look amazing for Kawhi Leonard too. Just another situation where you just have to wonder, like, as a person, do you have is your circle as tight as you may think it is, right?
Uncle Dennis, man, Uncle Dennis,
calling it out. All right, Shaw, let's quickly move ahead. Quick signing took place. Cam Thomas has decided, I want to run it up one more time with the Brooklyn Nets. I'm sure that's putting a smile on Michael Porter Jr.'s face. So what do we make of the 1-year signing for our man Cam Thomas, who is slated to make $6 million, re-signing with the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, qualifying offer is what it boils down to. He felt like he should get more money. There wasn't a lot of money out there for him, especially at this stage of the offseason. So did he lose some money? Probably not, because I think he'll be able to recoup some of this maybe next year, but he has to do the bet on himself situation. Hopefully he can stay healthy on a team that is obviously not that great. And he and Michael Porter, as I've said many times, will just be kind of taking turns, throwing that thing up there. So we'll see what the statistics look like for Cam Thomas. I'm not rooting against him in any way. I think he's a valuable basketball player, and especially when it comes to the offensive side. But the question is, does that value equate to winning? And those are things that I think are still a little bit in question.
I was going to ask you the question real quick, Shaw. Like, how do you see Cam Thomas? Because, like, right now in this climate of the NBA, I think that what he brings to the table makes him expendable. And I'm not saying that to be slight of him. What I'm saying is, yes, he's an explosive offensive player at times, but I think in this day and age right now, with the way teams are structured, with the way teams are, you're looking at your top tier teams. I don't think it's a question of those teams wanting just an explosive player. There has to be something else that comes with his game. And I think maybe if this was maybe 2 years ago, then we would be having a different conversation about he's really only going to make $6 million when there's maybe like 3 or 4 other different teams that could certainly utilize what he could bring to the table. I feel like there is this surgence of having those, I don't want to say 3-and-D type of guys, but really defensive intensive, those guys that are like glue kind of guys that are going to be necessary for the teams trying to make those stretch runs. And any team that's basically willing to pay any money for a guy like Cam Thomas is just like saying, we just need somebody that looks like they can, put up some impressive numbers on a certain night or something like that, but not necessarily become a foundational player. And it sucks because I think Cam Thomas is a good player, but I don't think that the situation of what the Brooklyn Nets doing now with this trade with Michael Porter Jr. does him any service whatsoever. So basically he's getting paid $6 million to undermine essentially what his skill set could actually be meant for in some other places.
I mean, he turned down other deals, right? He didn't like the other deals that were offered, and then he didn't want to not be able to control his destiny. He could have signed a different offer where he would have then given up, I guess, not his bird rights, but he would have given up the no trade clause as a result of the qualifying offer. So he needs to be able to keep his no trade clause in place, which he does, and then now decide where he ultimately wants to go next year. We haven't seen him in a different situation. He's only been on Brooklyn, and Brooklyn has had various iterations, I think, in the Cam Thomas era. So he's gone from not playing at all to being playing maybe overplayed to some degree. Obviously, I think his role is probably somewhere in the middle. He doesn't need to be your 1A player, but I think if he's, probably like your third option, so to speak, or your best scorer coming off the bench on a good team, there might be some wiggle there, but we just haven't seen it for Cam, unfortunately. I'm not down on him as many people are because they think he's just empty calorie scorer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't seen him in any other situation. So I won't really judge Cam Thomas's career until we get to another place, which will not be Brooklyn, and see where we go from there.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, Shaw and I do our segment, Reminisce Over You, Hall of Fame style. We talk about the 2025 Hall of Fame class, do a little reminiscing on an impressive list of those who have just been recently inducted into the Hall of Fame. You don't want to go anywhere. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. We're back, Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA Podcast. Time for us to do a little Reminisce Over You 2025 Hall of Fame class. And Shaw, what an impressive class of inductees into the Hall of Fame. It's kind of crazy, right? Like some of these people, I just probably want to say just yesterday, we were just probably watching games of their performances. And now we're already talking about how they are now forever enshrined in the class into the Hall of Fame. So the Naismith Hall of Fame. So it's really impressive, man. Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, Sue Bird, Maya Moore, Sylvia Fowles, the 2008 USA men's basketball team, aka the Redeem Team, Billy Donovan, referee Danny Crawford, owner Micky Arison. So really quite the impressive list, to say the least, man. And I wanted to get your thoughts a little bit before we kind of dig into each of these guys. But I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts about, did they get this right with this particular class?
Yeah, I mean, it is an excellent class. There's rarely, I guess, times where you're kind of raising your brow. Oh, I don't know how that got in. If I had to question anything, the notion of teams getting in is something that still doesn't quite connect with me the way that maybe it should. But this is the 14th
No,
team.
say how you speak, how you feel, Shaw. It bothers me. It really bothers me. Yes.
I can't quite figure it out, but this is the 14th team. So I had to look it up because I was like, how many times has this happened? So that 2008 team is obviously extremely rich in terms of Hall of Fame talent on their own right, but then it allows guys like Boozer and Darren Williams, Chris Paul, who will ultimately go into the Hall of Fame on his own right, on his own merit anyway, but Tayshaun Prince and some others, Michael Redd, they kind of get into the Hall of Fame based on this their participation on that roster. And I'm not knocking it per se, but if I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, I think that was the one thing that kind of caught me. But I understand in the lore of basketball how special that team was. But everybody else on this that has gotten in there has contributed to basketball. And remember, it's not the NBA Hall of Fame, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, has contributed in a major way to the sport.
I hear where you're coming from. I agree with you. It is a little awkward, right? But again, this is part of where the Hall of Fame loses me in all sports at times, because it just feels like you're appeasing to a specific audience, or you're appeasing to maybe a specific group that, feel some kind of way, like, why don't we do something like that? And I'm just like, there's a reason why you don't do something like that, right? Like, because I often thought of the Hall of Fame as an individual achievement. When you start putting teams in this, right? Like, how many of those individuals really helped contribute to that situation? And you can't leave any one particular person out of it. So it always is a very, like, these type of scenarios, I think is well received if we're putting together a historical, museum of outlining the history and the greatness of certain eras and certain teams during certain times. You get what I mean? That to me probably resonates a little bit more, and it's not to take away from the greatness of those players that were a part of a team. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that at times it's too much, because, outside the name of the team, are we making the comparisons of the Redeem team against the Dream team, right? Like, are we doing that? And how many of those players, a part of the Dream team, are in the Hall of Fame, right? How many, they're just, to me, it gets very etchy at times when we do things like that. I think teams are better suited when you do that for something as a historical context, a part of the Hall of Fame. But inducting them in the Hall of Fame, I often think as well, too, it takes away from those players. Carmelo Anthony is basically getting thrown in there twice. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I just think it's a little too much.
Yeah. Hey, yes, my overall opinion seems like on that is the one thing where we're like, all right. But again, it's not the first time. So that's at the end of the day. Like I said, if it was the first time this would happen, then maybe there could be more of a question mark here. But there's been 13 other teams that were inducted to the Hall of Fame, for whatever they were ultimately able to contribute to the game of basketball.
Actually, and one other thing too, Sean, I want to speak to this because I feel like there's a level of hypocrisy to this thing. Okay. And I'm not saying this because I think people are going to get this interpretation of me being unpatriotic or anything like that. It really has nothing to do with that. But we're talking about consistency. If you're going to start throwing in those teams a part of the Basketball Hall of Fame, what about the international teams that won gold medals, right? That did basically the impossible. When are we going to actually have conversations and acknowledge them and induct them? They are a part of basketball as well, too. Like, if we're talking about, to your point, Shaw, the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame should not only be limited to just what the American basketball players do, it should be expanded to the globalization of what other athletes and other teams have been doing to contribute to the popularity and the greatness of the sport of basketball. So at some particular point now, by you doing this, you open up Pandora's box, because my next question is going to be, when are we going to start acknowledging the first African-born player as part of Basketball Hall of Fame, and that the Filipino player, or a Jeremy? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, these are things that would be considered Hall of Fame in their countries as well too, but it's part of basketball. And if basketball is a global sport, they're going to have to be considered for the reasons that you're putting a team like the Redeem team into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'd encourage everybody to look up the other teams that have made it. I think there's a good point there. They are primarily American-based. And I don't know that this is the American Basketball Hall of Fame. So, there's some things in there I guess that should ultimately be considered, but also don't know what's going on in other countries, right? I don't know. Does, Europe have a Basketball Hall of Fame that we're not aware of? Like, there probably is some sort of recognition on that. But
how much you want to bet Michael Jordan is in there?
Well, in any event. So who are we going to start with first, man, in terms of our overall honoring?
Let's start with, obviously the man, the myth, the legend, Carmelo Anthony, right? Carmelo Anthony, 10-time NBA All-Star, 6-time All-NBA selection, ranks 10th on the NBA's all-time scoring list with 28,289 points over 19 seasons, led Syracuse to his first NCAA basketball championship as a freshman, earning most outstanding player honors in the 2003 Final Four. Internationally, Anthony is also a 3-time Olympic gold medalist for Team USA, holding the single game scoring record for the national team with 37 points, and is one of only 3 players with 4 Olympic basketball medals. Well deserved, obviously, right? Carmelo Anthony, iconic basketball player, probably one of the most deadly mid-range players I think we'll ever see of our generation, right? I know that people want to complicate him in that era of those franchise players and teams that literally built around the one player type of thing. But I can honestly say, Sean, we've said this as well too. Like, even when great players recognize that the window of opportunity closes on that possibility of winning an NBA title and things of that nature, that it's going to force them to change their game. And I give one of the greatest accolades I can give a guy like Carmelo Anthony is he tried. He tried mightily to change the way that he was as a player to acclimate himself to the teams that he was playing for, and I applaud that, because in basketball, even a great player at times who are putting up great numbers, it's hard for them to walk away from what they basically helped set up, right? The foundation that they set up, the great rivalries that he's had with LeBron James, unmatched. Even the rivalries with Dwayne Wade, they were part of a trifecta and era of basketball that I think we love and applaud. But Carmelo Anthony was just that guy, man. He was just an offensive juggernaut. And, with a mid-range, it was just to die for.
Yeah, I mean, Melo is one of those guys where like you can always kind of remember who he was. He had this really distinct impact on the game. The Nuggets teams probably kind of stonewalled, if you will, by the Kobe era, so to speak. And then went to New York in a time that not a lot of stars were going to New York. I think Amari was always the first guy, and then Melo joins, whatever. But the Knicks had a couple of decent runs there with Melo in tow. And, he made sure that he was able to recognize both of those situations. Yes, he had stops in OKC and Houston and Portland and even Lakers. But his career, it was built on his days on the Nuggets and the Knicks. And I even remember it's the entirety of his basketball career. So that one championship at Syracuse, kind of the one and done. I remember, I forget who it was saying it on the telecast, but he was just so physical as a freshman. They were just like, you don't see, 18, 19-year-olds coming and being that physical. And he was able to do that, put that shoulder in you, kind of ward you off a little bit, and then be able to explode and shoot over the top of guys, at that 6'7", 6'8" frame. I really, really did like Carmelo Anthony for the majority of his playing career. Had a couple of things, with some of our Celtics here and there. But ultimately, again, Melo he goes in as a Hall of Famer, 1,260 games played, almost 23 points per game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, call it, rounding up a little bit. Fabulous career for Carmelo Anthony.
Absolutely. I have one quick question to ask you, Shaw. If there was a head coach that you would have loved to see coach up Carmelo Anthony, who would it have been?
I think Melo would have really thrived had he ended up doing this whole situation with LeBron and Wade, so under Spoelstra. I think that's somebody who could have really gotten maybe a little bit more out of him, maybe from the defensive side more specifically, because then he would have been forced to play, kind of in that culture, air quote, winning style of basketball, because LeBron had to change his mindset, right? And LeBron was always going to be a very good player, but winning a championship, I think he owes a lot to that teaming up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, obviously, but also the mindset that Coach Spoelstra kind of instilled on that roster. So I think that's somebody in the days that he was playing, so to speak. If that would have happened, I think his career trajectory might have been even a little bit more amplified because he might even have more accolades under his overall belt.
I would have loved to have seen what Popovich would have been able to do with him.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I was really curious about, that if there was that possibility of having Duncan, Parker, and Carmelo Anthony, if that were to ever happen, what would that would look like? It'd be pretty.
Yeah, I mean, real quick
But
story.
the Spurs were quite fine with Ginobili.
But I don't know if you remember back in our days covering, All-Star Weekend, and the one year it was like he was angling to get out of Denver.
Yeah, we were on court. We were on the court.
Yeah, I believe it was Dallas. I think it was All-Star in Dallas.
Yeah.
And it was just so awkward. Like everything was like so.
And was it Rasheed? Was it Rasheed Wallace? No, it was Kevin Garnett. It was Kevin Garnett that came over to the desk, that came over when everybody was blitzing him, and he really didn't want to talk about the situation. He didn't want to talk about it, and he was basically like, it was so weird, right? Because then, like, a couple of years later, them two beefing. It's just like,
I remember. I mean, those days, like, I remember Duncan was there, Dirk was there, and so they were like, "Listen, we don't want to be involved in this conversation, right? Like, especially Dirk, because I'm pretty sure it was Dallas. He's the host player, if you will. So he's like, I don't care about what's happening with Carmelo in Denver. I got my own things I'm trying to worry about.
Got own stuff to worry about.
But again, that's kind of like not putting a disparaging mark on it. It was just something that when it comes to Carmelo, I'll always remember that because, hey, we were really kind of in the midst of that at that All-Star weekend. Then again, a few days later, he ends up traded to the Knicks, and the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. All right, let's go on to our next inductee. And his name is, he says he's Superman, even though Shaq says he's Superman. But now the two have made up, so now we have two Supermen. Dwight Howard is the only player in NBA history to win Defensive Player of the Year 3 consecutive times, from 2009 to 2011, ranking top 10 all-time in rebounds, over 14,000, and blocks 2,228. He's an 8-time NBA All-Star, 8-time All-NBA honoree, led the NBA in rebounds 5 times and blocks twice. It was a core member of the 2008 Redeem team that won Olympic gold. Howard secured his first NBA championship with the Lakers in the 2020 season. Look, man, Dwight Howard was just was a monster. Essentially when he wanted to be. I felt bad because I think the prime years, we could have been talking about Dwight Howard maybe winning 1, maybe 2 NBA titles, but the Cavaliers were in his way, the Celtics were in his way, and then things just didn't work out when he played with Kobe Bryant and the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think one of the things that I'm always going to take away from what I reflected about Dwight Howard and what I've always found to be who he is as a person, this guy's athleticism is just off the charts, man. Like, he could do what few people could do with his size and his build. Is just absolutely remarkable. And to be a 3 times Defensive Player of the Year, 3 years consecutively, it just speaks volumes to the level of commitment that he gave and he put himself into being that good, defensively. I think you can make the argument he probably will go down as probably one of the top 10 defenders of all time, maybe even top 5, with just how as who he was as a person and the emphasis that he had on the defensive side of the basketball was just unheard of and unmatched.
Yeah, Dwight was a truly physical, dominant presence. Again, quick story with that as well. The height of kind of like our coverage years following the league. I remember being in Orlando Magic locker rooms as well too, and just how jovial he would be. But then he took losing really, really harshly, and some people didn't always see that, right? Because he has a really jovial overall spirit, and some people just didn't take him seriously. But I was in locker rooms where he would be really upset, after tough losses. And Dwight understood that, hey, he had a job to do, but there's a lot more to life even than basketball. So his overall embodiment of being a human being is what I really respect about Dwight Howard, in addition to the statistics that he was able to put on the basketball floor on a regular basis. But again, that physical presence, dominance on the rebounding, dominance on when it comes to block shots, one of the better lob threats we've had in our game, not only just because of his size, multiple time dunk champion and all of that, despite what you want to say about the dunk contest, et cetera, et cetera. Dwight Howard really put it out on the floor and wasn't really afraid to be embarrassed, right? He put himself in air quote kind of compromising positions, so to speak, to be judged, but that didn't matter to him. And then the fact that he ends up getting an NBA championship in 2020 really kind of puts the chef's kiss on his overall career.
Yeah, my last thought about Dwight Howard, Shaw, and I think it's regarding what you were just saying that people didn't take him seriously. I think the problem that maybe some people had with Dwight Howard is that fire that burns inside of a person like a LeBron James, who you played against numerous times. He found it within himself to find another gear, and I don't know if whether or not we ever really kind of saw that because of everything that was going on with Dwight Howard in the situations and the circumstances regarding the Orlando Magic. And that has a factor, you know what I'm saying? It plays a part, and it also changes your perspective at times. I listen, we could have the same conversation about Carmelo Anthony, that some players at certain points just realize, you know what? I have to start accepting the fact that I might not wind up winning this thing under the landscape of what the current NBA looks like, because that person is in my way, or because that circumstances is just not allowing me to be where I want to be with certain things. And, we have to, as fans, it sucks because it feels like we're coming down on a player, but it's because we're seeing someone who's doing it differently and is figuring out a way to do it. And we're not seeing it from the person that we want to believe has that ability to do that. And it sucks, because I was hard on Dwight Howard. I wanted to see Dwight Howard thrive to a level where, like how we look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. You know what I'm saying? Like that was what I was expecting when during our heydays of watching Dwight Howard. And I think in some ways it kind of fell short. But as I've gotten older and I've relooked and relitigated all of the circumstances that have kind of combined into that, I'm not putting that all on him. I do think that what was missed, to your point, Shaw, is having one of those players who actually did enjoy the game of basketball, gave his all when he did play. He never, shorted anybody on when he was on that basketball court. And I think we have to appreciate that. And I'm glad he did finally win that NBA championship and was a part of it. Like he wasn't somebody that was riding the bench. He actually contributed significantly to the success of the Lakers winning that 2020 title.
Yeah, I mean, he's bothered by the fact that he didn't make the top 75. So then, and he kind of gets his revenge, if you will, by going in twice on the same night on that 2018, and then obviously for his career. But it is interesting because, yeah, you could always say like, yeah, you close one a little bit more. And you go look back at like his highest points per game ever was 23. He never averaged more than 23 a game for somebody that was that physical. And then obviously not being able to shoot free throws well kind of took some of his point total.
It took some of the toll, but I also think as well too, Stan Van Gundy had a lot to do with it, because remember, Stan Van Gundy and his style of offense was basically
Triple Lewis, Richard Lewis, those guys were out there doing their thing.
In-out type offense, right? Yeah. He believed that prioritizing the three more so than Dwight Howard, and Dwight will never speak to ill of Stan Van Gundy. I mean, obviously Stan Van Gundy allowed Dwight Howard to thrive, but you could clearly see that on the back end of his time and his tenure with the Magic, and the Magic not succeeding and falling short of expectations with Van Gundy, you could see that their relationship started to become strained, because you heard a lot of outward noise and comments post games and things of that nature. He neither here nor there, but again, Dwight Howard well deserved, and his numbers clearly. And listen, you can make the argument, regardless of what people see on big, big three and stuff like that, basketball, Dwight Howard could still probably play in this NBA right now. He could still, there is a team that could definitely use the body and the athleticism that he could bring to the table. May not be able to give you some 30-something minutes, but he can definitely give you some significant minutes that other guys that they struggle to get from some of the guys that they got on the bench that plays at the big position.
Yes, sir.
All right, coming up, Sean and I will go over a few now. We're going to transition to the WNBA. We got some notable names to throw up in there that are now Hall of Fame inductees. You don't want to miss it here on The Baseline. We are back. Cal Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. We're back, and it's time for us to continue our coverage of the Reminisce segment. 2025 Hall of Fame class. Next up, Shaw, Sue Bird, of course. Fly, Eagles fly. I mean, Sue Bird, the legendary point guard, winning 4 WNBA championships, 2 NCAA titles, 5 Olympic gold medals, over 21 WNBA seasons with the Seattle Storm. Sue Bird set records for most games played, assists, ranked 9th all-time in points, 2nd in made three-pointers, 13-time All-Star, and consistently ranked as WNBA's top 10 in any major statistical category. Listen, Shaw, you can make the argument that Sue Bird could probably be one of the top 75, top 100 greatest basketball players, that we'll ever know or come to know. I love Sue Bird, man. I hated Connecticut, but I loved Sue Bird. You know what I'm saying? And it sucks, man, because all of the players that I love watching all played for Connecticut. But she set the tone. She set the tenor. She is the foundation of why the WNBA is as successful as it's been. And for what she's been able to achieve is just remarkable and well-deserved to be in the Hall of Fame class.
Yeah, I got to be honest, in terms of women's basketball, I know there's many great players that even came before her and even since. But she was really the first one who I absolutely was paying attention and resonated with. I remember us even being in college at the time, just like, yo, what's going on at UConn? And what, that historical run that they were having, they were just like crushing people. And then for her to be able to maintain that brief stint overseas or whatever, then obviously joining the inaugural, season of WNBA and literally the first WNBA player with their own statue. Sue Bird is a living legend in basketball, as you alluded to, not just the WNBA, not women's basketball, but basketball period. She's an amazing individual who's highly accomplished, and I'm a very big fan, very big fan of as well.
One of the things, Shaw, that I love about Sue Bird is, in its essence, in its core, she embodied and embraced the point guard position. I mean, she is the definite, we often throw out the definitions with the, Chris Pauls and, we talk about the Havliceks and the Jerry Wests and, but I'm telling you, man, you look at the accolades that you put her resume up against some of those guys that we talk about, those greats that we talk about. And I'm telling you right now, if I had to choose and put a team together, I'm putting Sue Bird on my team, man. I know that she has the requisite knowledge, but she also has the gameplay to get my guys in the best position possible to go out and compete. It doesn't matter, man, woman, child, it doesn't matter. Sue Bird will take whoever she has on that roster and she will make them significantly better. And when the time calls for it, when you need a big shot, when you need a play, you need something to spark, she was always in the middle of it. She is our quote unquote Derek Jeter of the NBA. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people get all fascinated that she has to score like these ton of points, and everything that she does across the board significantly impacted not just the team, not just the sport, but the culture in and of itself. And I just love the fact that she is a part of that, man. That's one of the things I love about Sue Bird, man. I don't want to go too much on that tangent, but man, watching her be a part of this class, I mean, it's just the chef's kiss right there, because it was well-deserved and not a moment too soon, because everything that she has done has always been laying the foundation. She did that in Connecticut, where we saw that era of dominance take off again for what's the head coach's name? Gino. And we saw her do that for the Seattle Storm. We've seen her do that. Just like literally everything that she's done, man, has been foundational. And I appreciate that more than anything else.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to figure out her NBA comp, if there would be one. And then I'm not trying to disparage. I don't know if her NBA comp is like a Steve Nash, a Jason Kidd, or Stockton or whatever, but just one of the better point guards in the game of basketball to ever play.
But it's almost like you can't, right? Because every one of those guys you would probably mention lacked something that she was able to achieve in her own right, which is why it's like I can't imagine when we saying point guards of all time, she wouldn't be like one of those people that you speak of initially. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? All right, Shaw, let's move on. And this one, listen, I'm not going to say this is a no. I will say that this is wow, this is really soon. Maybe because Sue Bird is in there. And then in my head, I'm thinking, wow, because I probably said to myself, Maya Moore, right? I almost feel like in some way that she still be playing in the WNBA, if she was that damn good of a player. but she is one of basketball's most accomplished athletes with 4 WNBA championships, 2 NCAA titles, 2 Olympic gold medals, a WNBA MVP award, and a WNBA Finals MVP award. Rookie of the Year, selected to 6 WNBA All-Star games, 5 All WNBA first teams, and finished with one of the highest winning percentage in pro basketball history. Moore is also recognized for her advocacy and justice work after stepping away from the game in 2019. Man, look, when I read that off, I'm like, yeah, she definitely deserves to be in there. And in my head, I'm just like, it's just crazy to me that she still isn't playing the game of basketball. But what an impressive resume. Probably could go down as maybe one of the greatest basketball players to ever play the game if she had continued to keep playing, bro, with everything that she did, man. Maya Moore, what a cherish to the culture, man.
Yeah, I think, not trying to judge it, and everybody had their moment and did their thing. I think her speech was probably the best of the night. Something that I think you can go back and play, and encourage, people, women, men, it doesn't really matter. She's just so extremely intelligent as an individual and connected as a human being. And that's one thing I think, again, about the entirety of this class. Like, they're just really good people, or they've evolved into even better people with some of the experiences that they've had. But Maya Moore just had it like locked and loaded. I remember watching her speech, and even my wife was like, well, damn, it was just inspiring. So what she did on the basketball court, what cannot even be, it got her into the Hall of Fame, but what she's done as an individual is almost, like a Nobel Peace Prize worthy. Like, she's just so embedded in terms of just doing the right thing. But again, she was an incredible basketball talent that I was really, really excited that we had an opportunity to see in our lifetime.
Absolutely. All right, Shaw, we got one more that we're going to throw into the mix here of our female contemporaries getting into the Hall of Fame. Sylvia Fowles, renowned as one of the WNBA's greatest centers, winning 2 WNBA titles, 2 final MVPs, 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, second to only Tamika Catchings, 8 All-Star selections, ranked second all-time in rebounds, 4th in blocks, named to 11 all-defensive teams, won 5 Olympic gold medals with Team USA, and her jersey retired with both the Minnesota Lynx and the LSU Tigers. What can be said, man? And it's so weird, man, because she came up in a time where I think the fixation was on like the Sue Birds and Elisa Leslies and things of that nature. And we're just like, have we not forgotten the greatness of Sylvia Fowles? I just think it's apropos that the icing on the cake for her illustrious NBA career is topped off with her being considered as one of the greatest and is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, somebody who had that ability to really defend, at a high level. Almost Dwight Howard-esque, I guess, if you can say, kind of like not necessarily the counterparts, but, similar skill sets, when it comes to the men's and women's game. And again, somebody else who really didn't always get their flowers at the highest level, right? She's very accomplished and decorated, but sometimes was maybe still a little bit underrated because it wasn't the highest scoring person on a regular basis, because she really, honed in on the defensive side of basketball. But winning MVPs, winning those multiple defensive players a year and being such a rebounding prowess that she was, on so many, many great women's teams. I'm really excited to see that she was honored in the way she was, even understated, I think, to some degree in her speech as well, too. Just like, hey, I'm happy to be here. But, she doesn't need that. She earned every bit of that Hall of Fame induction that she got last night.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll wrap up with our Reminisce Over You segment, discussing those that have been indoctrined. We got the 2008 Redeem Team. We also have a head coach, and we also have a referee who's well-deserved and has been acknowledged and inducted. So you don't want to miss it here on The Baseline. We're back. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Rounding up our coverage of the Hall of Fame 2025 class. So now we have the 2008 USA Men's Basketball Redeem Team. The Redeem Team dominated the 2008 Beijing Olympics, winning gold in undefeated fashion, featuring stars like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, and Dwight Howard. And they set the new Olympic standard for teamwork, defense, and star power. What more can be said, Shaw? I mean, after what happened in 2004, you knew that this was coming, and those guys showed up and showed out, and they dominated. They dominated. And to this day, there is not a time where we don't talk about, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, the conversations, what they did together, being a part of the Redeem team. Just a awesome, showing of display of realigning the men's basketball team back at the top of the pecking order.
I think about that, and also watching the ceremony. Anything with LeBron and Kobe on it is going to be legendary in that of itself. And so we touched on this earlier in the thing in terms of like maybe our questions on why a team was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, but there's no doubt that it was talented. And when I think about just like the point guard roster, especially on that, Darren Williams is somebody who will probably not get into the Hall of Fame on his own merit, so to speak, but he was a problem back in those days, hence why he was on the team. So Jay Kidd, Chris Paul, Darren Williams as your point guard lineup, just absolutely ridiculous and stunning. In addition to obviously LeBron, Wade, Chris Bosh on that team as well too. I really am, and Coach K at the helm. That team really did what it set out to do. Extremely talented, and I know there's been a lot of debates. The Redeem team beat the Dream Team and so forth. That's stuff for y'all to play out on 2K. I'm not really getting into any of that, but ultimately, really, really well-deserved honor in general for a team that did out exactly what it accomplished, what it set out to do.
2K or NBA Live?
We already know the answer to that.
All right, Shaw, let's transition now. Let's talk head coach Billy Donovan, celebrated for coaching excellence, guiding the University of Florida to back-to-back NCAA championships in 2006 and 2007. Ranks among the top college coaches of his era and has successfully transitioned to the NBA, currently serving as head coach of the Chicago Bulls. A little weird on this one because, look, I'm not saying that Billy Donovan is not deserving, but in my head I'm thinking maybe a little too soon. But listen, if you're going to right now look at what he was able to achieve, getting the University of Florida back-to-back NCAA championships, him being a part of the Pitino lineage. Listen, what more can be said, man? Billy Donovan is that guy.
He is. I mean, successful runs at OKC and, having maybe some difficult times here in Chicago, but has always been known as a coach that players do appreciate and want to play for. And that says a lot. And obviously his time at UF is primarily, I think, the sticking points on getting him into this induction here at this point of his career. And he's still got some more track record to go here as well, too. So having success at the college level, having success at the NBA level as well, too, to a certain degree, really gives Billy Donovan, the resume that is needed in essence, I think, at this stage.
All right. Now we get to talk about a referee. Danny Crawford, officiating more than 2,000 NBA games, including multiple NBA finals over his 32-year career, an illustrious career, recognized for professionalism, consistency, and integrity. He set the bar high for the league officials, and he's basically earned the respect amongst most players and coaches. Danny Crawford's name resonates, man, and you've probably heard his name being called as one of the head referees officiating any playoff or NBA finals. We were not going to have that conversation about the game being fixed. So kudos to Danny Crawford, man. But yeah, his name always is in the breadth of conversations of the great games that have been covered during his tenure of the NBA, and it's well proposed that he's also been added into this mix, being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, you don't always want to know the referees' names and who they are. But he's somebody who, especially in our day, one of the first ones that I started to really recognize and know, even dare I say, as a Black official as well, too, and just understanding, the respect that he had amongst his the players in essence that he was officiating the games for. So I really respect Danny Crawford. Never really looked at him like, oh God, he's refereeing the game. There's some guys who I won't name on here. I'm like, oh, you kind of feel like, they have their own personalities and tempers that seem to overtake some portions of the game at time. I never really got that from Danny Crawford. And again, somebody who seems to be really, really expected by his peers and coaches alike.
Absolutely. Finally, Shaw, will round up our conversation here with your favorite guy, owner of the Miami Heat, Micky Arison. Micky Arison has guided the franchise to 3 NBA championships and several NBA final appearances. Under his leadership, the Heat became a model organization for player empowerment and front office innovation, while elevating Miami standing as a major basketball city. I will say this, Shaw. Despite your love and affection for Micky Arison, the fact that he is responsible for making Miami basketball a relevant basketball market, I think speaks volumes.
Yeah.
It allows you to live comfortably there. And then you can actually go and see the Boston Celtics take it to the Miami Heat down in Miami and not have to drive all the way up to Orlando to see that happen.
I will say, in terms of, governorship, he's one of the more understated individuals. He lets the basketball people do the basketball thing. He's not really, most people may not even know who Micky Arison is, right?
Exactly. Like that, which is remarkable because everyone is always under the assumption that Pat Riley owns the Miami Heat when it's really Micky Arison.
Yeah, and he's done a great job. I believe some of his investments and money comes from the Carnival Cruise Line era, et cetera, et cetera. But understands what it means to run a top-notch and top-level organization, invested in the team, invested in the player development and coaching of that, and even the overall facilities, at a time where, not say that was frowned upon, but he understood that there was value into that too. I think guys like Cuban came into the league and say, hey, how do we make our players and coaches feel better even within our own confines and spaces? And while it's not overly luxurious and, and almost, kind of just foolish with the spending, he understands that, hey, these are top level guys, so they deserve top level treatment. But I also want you to play at the top level as well too when you're putting your effort on the basketball court. I think Micky Arison gets it as a owner / governor in the NBA, and hence why he's been able to get his way into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and one last point to what you were saying, Shaw. Micky Arison really truly appreciates what the Miami Heat has been able to do without him having to have a heavy hand in allowing it to flourish. Some owners, I think, have to have their imprint in order to, like, the style of how the team is a reflection of what the owner is. I think that was one of the things that allured us to what the Dallas Mavericks had evolved into, with Mark Cuban, and with Steve Ballmer with the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Buss family with the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Buss family with the Los Angeles Lakers. But Micky Arison was one of those owners who honestly you could not tell whether or not, but you can see that the culture was a reflection of what was most important to him. And that's why Heat culture, I think, is been adopted and now is really been understood. Because now that you're putting someone like him into the Hall of Fame, it's not just a fluke thing. It's not something that gets kind of bantered about on the social media tweets and memes and people saying that Miami, doesn't have a real fan base. All of that is dead, right? Like, you legitimately now have to respect the man who is responsible for establishing something that's no longer a myth, but is actually real.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but you figure he's probably one of the longest tenured, governors, owners in the league, I think, currently, and with the record prices that our teams are being gone for, you don't know if, okay, hey, it's a right time just from a business opportunity. But he's allowed basketball to let the basketball people do the basketball thing without over empowering and understanding that, hey, if they shine, then I automatically shine as well too, because hey, I'm the one who's paying the bills. So I really respect Micky Arison and the entirety of that kind of ownership group, if you will. When you talk about culture, yes, it gets overutilized and kind of even poked fun at, I think, a lot of times too, but they are really truly a steady leadership group. And it starts with Mickey, and Pat Riley and Spo and Andy Ellisberg as well, two guys who've all been a part of that organization for a very, very long time.
Absolutely, man. Wow. It's a lot of names we went through, bro. A lot of Hall of Famers, a lot of good stuff, a lot of good memories. All of them, thankfully are alive and kicking, and they all gave great eloquent speeches. But now they are forever shrined in the level of greatness that is what we consider the culture of basketball. And I think every single one of them is deservative, because each and every single one of them are responsible for certain timelines and certain moments and certain periods, where the greatness of basketball has shined. And I just couldn't be happier for each and every single one of the people that we just discussed.
Yeah. Again, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, go back. There's plenty of replays, catch the clips on YouTube. Watch Maya Moore's speech, the entirety of it. It's really is moving, I think, in general. And to see the joy Dwight Howard had, specifically Melo and his call outs to his mom, his sister, Puerto Rico, all the hard times he had in essence kind of growing up. Just a lot of great moments kind of throughout that, and an opportunity to celebrate basketball culture in the way that it really should be, and not really focusing on the negativity and some of the hyperbole that we often get caught in. And especially when in coverage of today's game, this is all about the positivities of these fine individuals and team that got in. So kudos to the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, the NBA, WNBA, and all parties associated with this event.
Absolutely. Great episode, my brother. Great episode. I know that we are on a little bit of a hiatus, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm sorry. 2 weeks. We'll be back in 2 weeks, getting ourselves ready for this upcoming NBA season. Got a lot of stuff happening. Got a lot of things for us to get ready and get you and yours ready for, because this is going to definitely be one of the most interesting NBA seasons to date. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week. We'll catch up with you next time.